Character design for Futurama falls into a couple of categories. We usually in each episode may have a ton of new characters based on some planet we've never been to before, or we may have just a radical departure of how our characters appear. So when we get the script from the writers, the first thing we do is a design breakdown where we break down all the designs that'll be necessary either for character, background, or prop. And we have our own awesome team of designers that work really closely with the director and Pete, our supervising director, on inventing whatever's necessary for a specific episode.
Character design is the designing of the characters that are in our show. It ranges from the characters who are in our show every week, like Fry, Bender, Leela. Also, it includes new characters in the show.
Aye, I'll help ye for a cut of the booty.
Tarquin was a sea captain, so I pretty much looked at a bunch of references from sea creatures, sea plants, and so I wanted him to be a sea alien. We added a bunch of elements from sea plants, animals, just so he looks like he belongs to the ocean.
Matt's style is so strong and specific that it's actually fairly easy to adapt to. And I think our designers have gotten just really great at working within that style.
I think that's the funnest part about this project is coming up with new characters and developing your own and showing them what you got, but still keeping it in the style of Futurama. Key element of this character design is trying to have the overbite there.
And having a walleye. As long as we keep that in the style, it kind of sells the idea that it's drawn in the Matt Groening style.
Well, enough governing. It's Saturday morning, damn it. Let's watch some cartoons.
We have to, A, make the characters fit with the other characters in the show. B, evoke whatever emotion or characteristics there are, like if it's a railroad working robot, he probably should clearly look like he works on the railroad. You should look at that design and say, that guy works on the railroad.
I think that's the fun of Futurama. You're not just designing another robot. There's usually a genre attached to it and storytelling attached to it that really makes it fun to design those characters.
We have 2 to 3 to sometimes 4 character designers working at a time, depending on the show. Some shows have armies in them, and some shows have one new character in them. So it varies from show to show.
This season, we've had a couple of challenging designs. One was a flame creature, which appears in an episode where the Planet Express team ends up sort of fighting this great fire on the sun, and Bender inadvertently brings back a stowaway who's a serial arsonist.
Greetings, Bender. Thank you for transporting me from the sun to your helpless, flammable planet.
How could a fire learn to talk?
His description was very minor. It was just the flame creature. So it was a challenge to sort of come up with something that could talk and act and have personality and also is constantly animating because he's literally a flame.
If I can't rule the sun, I shall ignite your planet and rule here instead.
When we draw a new character, they're basically pretty much humanoid for the most part, unless they're an alien, and we follow the existing mouth charts. But for him, he was like this unique moving flame, so I had to figure out how organically his mouth would move and still hold this really cool, sinister vibe, and also keep it Futurama style mouth. So it was kind of fun to come up with all those mouth shapes.
We also have a very sort of classic fairy tale episode where Leela undergoes a pretty major transformation by the end of the episode.
Leela develops squidification in one episode, and she goes through about 5 different stages where her arms start to get suction cups, and then they turn into tentacles. She sprouts tentacles to the point where she's just a big mass of tentacles with her face.
I'm keeping her same head, but I'm eliminating her body completely and just elongating it. She's a little taller than she would normally be because she's basically just a stretched out mass of tentacles that are sliming along. I know. But that was kind of fun because they're just a bunch of overlapping shapes, but it comes together to look like a bunch of tentacles.
And other times we might have to design our characters in styles of different shows, like several different Saturday morning versions, which were a lot of fun to do for the designers.
This was another challenge. We went back and forth as far as like, should we make him a robotic dog or should we just keep him as is, but put him on all fours? So I gave him little spots, pretty much stylized him to fit that genre of character design.
Each season's a new challenge, and this was no exception. A lot of new characters to design. As always, it's a challenge to make them new and fresh and funny.
I think we broke the barrier with characters. There was a ton of characters, a ton of great backgrounds, a ton of different environments that we covered, different genres of characters as well. It was a lot of fun for me. I love working on different styles of shows and coming up with different characters for those shows.
I like drawing robots and monsters and aliens and all that stuff, but I especially like when they ask me to kind of design something in the show in a cutesy style because it's really close to how I naturally draw things. I tend to draw things really cute and small and big eyes.
We really don't half-ass anything, and I think whether, you know, a design appears incidentally or is, you know, a major new design, we really sort of pour our hearts into it, and I think it really sort of flows from the directors who really just have a passion for what they're doing that shows through, and it's really motivating and rewarding for the designers to work with them, and it's so much fun to see something you designed and created up on screen that really helps tell a story or help make a joke work or contributes to the success of the show.
When the shows go into the color department, that's where I really hand it off. Our department are all painters or they have color theory knowledge, and they can build these backgrounds and environments that are just beautiful, and they're all tied together and they have mood.
We couldn't ask for a better team to work on the show. Every single thing you see on screen that has a unique color has been designed by them.
They sort of find a way of making, you know, every place we go to sort of unique and just inspiring and ultimately in the color theme of the show.
One of the things that we wanted to achieve in Futurama is to basically get a great looking show. One of the key ways of doing this is to create a beautiful color palette.
Futurama probably has one of the most beautiful palettes, and it's something you sort of don't always associate with animation, or certainly television animation.
Why isn't there a lighthouse to guide us away from the rocks?
I don't know, but look out for that lighthouse!
Our show uses drawn backgrounds. There's line art on the backgrounds. It does make it a little easier when we do 3D backgrounds. It's easier to blend them to the 2D because you have that outline. But, you know, it takes a little extra effort to make them separate from the characters, make them have a little more depth and look realistic, even though they're clearly a drawing.
All the characters will also have lighting on them, and that's done with scales. I call them scales, or RGB scales, which will give them a little bit of a warm highlight on them and a shadow to go with the fire.
Name's Tarquin. Been alone here tending this light longer than I can remember.
Each one of our designs gets put into a database, and that database we export for the color department. They look at each design and color it, and sometimes they will overlap the different designs if they need to see a character against a background or a character with a prop, so that you can anticipate how those colors are going to react and how the entire shot's going to look as a result.
One thing we do with our backgrounds is we Photoshop them just to give them a little bit of depth, a little bit of atmosphere, and it makes the characters, while they don't pop off it, they still stand out distinctly from it.
When we started with Futurama about 14 years back, it's a total blank slate, you know, it's like, this is how we get our, until then the whole show is designed only as such, just black and white line. There's no color, there's nothing established, so the color becomes the emotion of the show. And we, over time, came up with a palette that we felt was rich and playful, and also kind of kept the sense of like the toy they were mimicking. And we also wanted to, because it's futuristic and they go to all these different locations, we wanted to kind of keep it a little bit more sophisticated with the color too. And so it's playful and a bit rich in color and not just bright and gaudy.
Our artist, Alex, will go into each surface and using color ramps and textures and highlights, he'll add that dimension to those backgrounds so that when we actually composite the scene together, it has one more element of depth to it.
I just try to enhance it a little bit. I'll just follow their lighting structure, and basically I'm supposed to just like blend all that sky color in. He had it already keyed in, and then just sort of make it feel more like sunset, like so with the sun hitting the edges of the buildings and popping that warm color. And then I'm adding some shadows in the back just to really sell that illusion, I guess. And these guys make it really easy for me because, as long as I don't destroy like any of their value structures or the colors, it usually works out for the most part.
The last episode of Volume 8, Fry unfortunately has the dubious distinction of dying several times by landing in a pile and literally liquefying.
Oops! Fry! Professor?
There is actually a lot of discussion on how sort of gory/graphic liquefied Fry, or the puddle of Fry, should be. I'd say that's probably one of my favorite all-time Futurama episodes.
You need to basically incorporate some of Fry's colors, but also you have to basically show his insides. In this particular instance, it's just making sure that it still reads like Fry, even when it's a million blobby molecules flying through the air.
We always want to make sure we have the exact same stock palette that we always use for Fry, at least for what's left. His hands, his hair, his eyeballs, shoe. And then I start playing with the color and putting the model right over top of the background. It doesn't exactly fit in perspective, but it gives us an idea what it's going to look like compared to all the other colors and the tonality of the scene.
He sure has a lot of blood for a skinny guy.
Color can become the emotion of the show. That's why I'm glad we have the great color people that we do, because they know how to make color become the motion of the show. And I'm glad that they're to do that.
Our colorists have, over the years developed this really great sensibility for color.
It's much more to do with the emotion of color and understanding depth and stuff using color. So I think we were very fortunate to have worked together all these years and established the look.
We color every background, every prop, and every character. Everything is sort of goes off the feeling, that same intensity, that same richness of color, depending on where we are, what we're trying to get across. It's a lot of fun.
They're able to build a new environment that is not what you expect to see, but when you see it, you buy it because the colors work together.
Taking us to completely new places, but then not making us feel they don't belong in our world. And I think that they succeed at that 100% of the time.
Why don't you just show her your big blue ass?
Oh, I'm getting to that.
If you sit down and try to design colors by yourself, you may be able to fill the areas with color. Technically, you're just filling areas with color, but in order to create the pleasing kind of inner relationships between the colors and make things stand out or make things recede and make just basically the colors work together, it is an art form. And it takes a sort of a special eye to be able to design colors and to think about colors in that sort of intimate kind of way.
Call me.
Futurama is an incredibly cinematic show. It is very sophisticated looking and in some ways much more theatrical than, the sort of standard proscenium television.
It's a show about the future. For that reason alone, probably somebody said, hey, we should have 3D in this show about the future. Because remember, this started in '98 or so.
The 3D really helps us sort of blow up these worlds and create these places where you sort of want to go and you want to see and you want to travel to.
That's what you can credit Scott Vanzo and his crew the most for, is successfully merging the 3D in our show with the rest of the show. It doesn't stand out as just shockingly obvious what is what.
I'm the lead 3D artist at Rough Draft Studios. I do a lot of the 3D shots on Futurama.
All right, let's ride.
So this is the Gloriana's sun for show 15, the safe ship. Everything is 3D in this show. There are particles for the sun corona and paint effects for the rainbow parts of the sun. Everything else is geometry.
We use a special shading process, which we just call cartoon shading, which allows us to make the three-dimensional models look like two-dimensional hand-painted cells.
I was working on Cloud Castle. I worked basically on this design in 3D. You can see the wireframes in 3D.
We have sequences that there's no other way to do them than in 3D. For instance, where the professor is street racing through the streets of New York with two other cars, we have to really go through and plan it.
The trickier part with that scene was the choreography of the ships and making them look like they're taking a tight corner and that they're zooming around each other and that they're, behaving like race cars should. And there's a sense of speed and urgency to the different ship. Like when you go around a very tight corner, you want a sense that there's a weight to the object and that there's a more natural sort of reaction to the ship as it takes that tight corner.
It's a long story I can't get into while we're spinning out.
Those scenes that are done in 3D, like the ship is underneath this elevated train track and the cars are doing this, and then you cut to the ship's POV of the cars coming at them. Those are incredible shots. There's no way, to do those without doing them in 3D.
On heavier scenes like this, we end up having to look at it in this wireframe mode. It's basically like chicken wire of the surface, so we can see where the surfaces are. The only problem is we can't see lighting, we can't see things that are penetrating through each other, which is why we will generally go to a shaded mode once we have our motions down.
The modeling software uses different types of geometry, three-dimensional geometry, to describe an object. Geometry can look sort of like a chicken wire mesh that describes the outer part of the object. And so it's up to the modeler to basically go in and control the way that mesh is formed in order to make it show every contour and every detail of a design.
I have to say, for better or worse, has become the season of the extreme either push in or pull out, sort of through New York, through Earth, through space, and then you end up on another planet, or the opposite, where you start somewhere else and sort of zoom back in.
It's great to have the 3D for the standard shots, which you just know are going to be there. But also, if you have to do a shot, let's say from the Planet Express building up through space to the sun, and then zoom in on this mine, it's great to have 3D to really make that a spectacular shot with.
Well, this shot basically caused us to have to really ramp it up because we're zooming right into the surface. And then we're gonna turn 90 degrees and fly right along the surface. So you're seeing everything so much more close up than we've ever seen before.
At the end of the day, it allows us to sort of pull off shots that either we could never do in 2D or we could just not do well. It keeps the quality of the show up by, not having stuff that doesn't look great.
2.1 dimensions, 2.2, 2.pi. Look, up there, there's some up.
The third dimension.
The writers came up with this idea after seeing some videos online of enthusiasts who are using some available software to develop these 3D environments using fractal geometry that was formed with fractal formulas.
That whole fractal universe is pretty awesome, and when we screened that episode for the writers, there were just a lot of dropped jaws, so we knew we had actually pulled that one off really well.
It involved actually quite a bit of research on my part to figure out how this was done and how to do it well.
It really was like an incredibly sort of trial and error process. Just it's sort of like you know what you want to get, but there's not, necessarily a direct correlation to how to get there.
The most challenging part of using the software is a tiny little change in a parameter can create a huge difference in appearance. You have to start learning which parameters will have what magnitude of effect.
That fractal sequence, which Scott pretty much did on his own, may have been the greatest dedication of labor to the least amount of footage we've ever had in Futurama.
Indeed, but we're about to crash into some sort of huge disc.
My balls returned at a bad time.
This season, Volume 8, definitely pushed the boundaries of how much 3D we can get done in any one season, and certainly in any one episode.
It's been really enjoyable working on Futurama over the years because you have a show that's driven by a group of writers who love to kind of push the boundaries of science and aspects of real life. And there's been a tremendous amount of trust placed on our team to come up with the look that the show has today.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm feeling a little...
It's sort of all window dressing for the core of the show. So it's all just making something prettier, but the writing and the storytelling and the joke telling that makes Futurama succeed. We're just, we're kind of like the beautification team.